everyone, welcome to the Cleantech Race. Klaus, thank you for being here today.
Peter, likewise.
We have completed a joint effort, a study on hydrogen, and want to share some results today. And we'd also have developed, as part of this study, some theses which we'll show to our audience, and we're looking forward to their comments and their interaction with us afterwards. But as a starter, as we walk through some of these findings, let me ask you one thing, which is, I have the impression when it comes to hydrogen, sometimes the public perception and the portrayal is out of touch with reality. We're talking about something in terms of technology and its economics that's just not there yet.
I like that, Peter. And for me, it's that kind of picture of everyone wants to jump on the bandwagon and just make sure I am not missing something. And it's really everyone. It's the politicians who love to have a solution for the Energiewende. It's companies who see that as a kind of opportunity, not only taking the responsibility, getting CO2 neutral, but also on a growth perspective. Capital markets, public opinion, everyone loves it. So there's no one opposing, and that is always dangerous. These hypes normally tend to have that effect that at the end the target is not being achieved.
I think we would, even from the different angles looking at the topic, agree on one thing, which is anything that's been developed and that's been subsidized as a start, and where also companies from a private side invest a lot of their resources to develop it and scale it, has to be competitive in the long run. It has to sort of, in a field of technologies that all drive to become sustainable, that all want to make sure we reach net zero in any sector. But anything that's not competitive in the long run should be abandoned.
I couldn't more agree. If you look at our companies in most important industries, chemicals, refineries, steel, that's all international. Yeah, so we are not an island, not a German island.
In Germany,
we love our island, as every nation probably loves their own country. But we need to look directly from the beginning into a international competitive way, an economic way. Yeah? And of course, and that is where I think the focus is on now. What are the biggest potentials to reduce CO2 on a short notice?
And looking as we did, and as we also in our organization do, a lot at the cost side, the LCOE, so the levelized cost of electricity or of producing hydrogen, it makes one wonder sometimes about now 2021 research projects, funding, subsidies, being announced on sectors that are actually foreseeably decarbonized better, cheaper, and more climate friendly through other technologies, right?
Yeah, I think that is exactly what a hype is all about. Yeah. I mean, it's not realistic. It's not based on facts and figures anymore. It's about, and I like these kind of setting very ambitious targets, and I think that is where we are in that stage. And I think your point is absolutely correct, Peter, in saying, look, now comes reality and implementation, and by the way, it will take longer.
Yeah. Maybe a key consideration is that resources, after all, even with all the attention and the financial support and the backing the Energiewende, the energy transition gets across the world in the meantime, still these resources are limited in the long run, and the challenges are just huge. Because people see, of course, solar PV, so photovoltaics, we see onshore wind, we see the success stories in electric mobility and other things, but sometimes it's not obvious for like a general educated public how strong the share of emissions from other sectors is, such as industry, such as agriculture, by the way, and other parts that need to be decarbonized. And so these resources which we're talking about should be allocated very smartly into those segments where they make most sense.
Yeah, and that now you are taking, so to say, the economic view. Let me take the CO2 reduction view as, and for me, it's also important to see we are creating right now a scarce resource, and that is renewable energy production. Yeah, and then we can, or we need to switch between hydrogen and directly electrification of industrial processes and whatever we need. So creating a scarce resource, and we know that from chip industry, we know wherever we are talking about, is always a kind of dangerous thing. And that needs to be solved rather sooner than later.
Again, I agree, but I still want to stress the economic side of it, of course.
Go for it.
Because, so we have this scarce resource. We have actually foreseeably too much demand for clean electricity. First of all, we're trying to electrify everything. And then we've got an existing segment of hydrogen. It's a huge business, which sometimes is also not mentioned in many publications, that hydrogen now
plays a role.
It plays a role.
Yeah.
And it's, we discussed it before officially starting here, but it's like 100 million tons industry per year, which is almost completely fossil based. So it's almost completely produced out of natural gas, coal and oil. And it contributes more than 1.5% to global overall greenhouse gas emissions. So, and there are some segments which we cannot decarbonize unless we use hydrogen, like a segment you're working on a lot, which is steel industries. So we have these existing segments, basically the refining industries and ammonia production for fertilizers, for the food production worldwide. And in addition, there's a couple of other industries where we already know there's no other way than using hydrogen if we want to decarbonize. So driving down the cost is highly important for the process itself. So, I mean, like green hydrogen. I know you don't like the color coding, but the clean, let's call it water electrolysis with renewable energy. Okay?
I think we have, before we come to that color coding, we have two races to win. And one is exactly as you put it, it's about most efficient R&D, subsidies, whatever we need to make sure that the basic industries, let's call it this way, like chemistry, refinery, steel, whatever we need to have a German industrial basis in the future needs to be decarbonized. And that needs to be, for me, the first race to win. And the second race is if electricity, and let's try avoid colors, renewable electricity is scarce resource, then of course increasing that is simply not only no regret, but is probably the critical path.
One thing, I mean, there's two sides again to it when driving down the cost for, call it, sustainable hydrogen. Okay, so
I love
what most people call green. But just so everybody knows what we're talking about. And one thing is, of course, the cost of electricity. So driving down further, having steep learning curves of these technologies and driving down the cost for clean electricity. The other segment is basically the electrolysis. If we want to use water electrolysis, we need to get the cost for the separate components down. There's various wells. There's alkaline, like the mainstream electrolysis process. There's not so much innovation potential anymore. Probably it'll reach the lowest level in the 2030s. And then there's two other segments, the PEM and the high temperature electrolysis, which, just as an example, will probably, according to many studies, only reach the cost potential in the 2040s.
And what I like
a long-time process that is.
And what I like is you are thinking globally, and I think that is what we have to do. Hydrogen is not a national thing. When we develop markets, yes, we need to start in areas like Ruhr area, Hamburg, or whatever it is, to find the right kind of size where company can work together and create small markets. But overarchingly, getting costs down, getting efficiency done, getting scale, getting markets is international.
Could we agree on leaving segments that just don't make any sense?
I love it.
Let's withdraw, even existing projects.
I think realistically, we can't do anything at the same time. And some have a better prognosis to win the battle, and let's focus on these.
Yeah, true.
What is it for you, Peter?
Well, I think, first of all, there's the segment that's already gray hydrogen, that's there. So decarbonize this, which is refining, which might decrease in size, but which is food production and fertilizers, ammonia. Then there's the steel industry, and something we're looking into right now is long duration storage, because there hydrogen has a couple of advantages over other technologies, but it still needs to be developed, and it's costly, but sometimes if it's without alternative, it makes sense to look into it. Other segments, mobility, especially
skip it.
Yeah, I mean, there's some parts like long distance, very heavy load, where it might make sense, but a big part of it, and the building sector, it does not make much sense, and just not too much resources.
And the same is true for some companies. Yeah, I mean, we are talking about big infrastructure for the fundament of the German industry. So it's also, and that is what I have in talks sometimes saying, look to a client saying, no, it doesn't make sense for you to jump on that bandwagon. Yeah, it's simply a nice wave. It's simply a kind of movement. But probably better to wait until there is a market and you can better assess risks and opportunities.
How would you define the critical size of a company, a group, an actor, a player, to enter a certain part of the value chain? What's your view on this?
No rule. Very individual, project by project base. It's nothing where I can put a marketing story out and say, by the way, I'm now. It's about concrete investments, very concrete business case for every single investment. At the end, the board has to decide. The people who have to decide.
And subsidies should not distort too much, right? Because that might only help in the short term.
The private capital is key. If I get something for free, of course, I'm jumping again on the train. Yeah? That doesn't help. It is about getting risk awareness into that game, and then having opportunity to decide on is that a chance or a risk for us, and what is the purpose in the business. And I think that is where we are quite good on the way, by the way. Many companies do that right now. Some of the smaller should probably stop it.
Yeah, we have sort of looked at this whole topic from two very different perspectives. And we've summarized this in these 5 theses which we've mentioned and which will be available. So we would be happy for viewers to share the theses, to challenge them, to comment them, of course. But may I ask, this project, discussing so much on this, what's your key takeaway on this? What's your maybe priority list or so?
First of all, it is about start with the industry, with the most important industries, because that is where we want to build our future. Stop color coding, because it doesn't help. We need all kind of volume in the beginning, and make sure that electricity out of renewables is not getting a scarce resource where we then have to fight for.
Great.
How about you?
Well, I think it is be aware, be it the private side or the public side, also especially the public decision makers, that the resources are scarce for investing in R&D. And find the right niche for R&D investments and stay out of the topics that have been solved, basically. But target, basically, it's complementing your findings because it's about industry. It's about industry first, and it's about those parts that we cannot decarbonize other than with hydrogen, and we should make sure that all the efforts go into that and that they're international right away. Because developing in islands has a lot of disadvantages. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time, and we look forward to comments from our audience, from our viewers, and we look forward to continuing this debate with you.
Thank you, Peter.